Hey guys, this is FIDE Master Victor Neutralize. Have you ever heard such a phrase? Controlling the center is to control the game. I believe yes, because it's absolute truth. The side who controls the middle of the board or the center usually has more options to play and dominate in the game. Why? Because everything goes through the center. You can relocate your pieces through the center much faster, and a piece standing in the center can participate into a play on both sides of the board. Do you want to learn how to get the control over the center and dominate in the game? I hope yes. If so, please watch this video, how to control the middle of the board and why it is important. Because in this video I prepared 5 tips for you that can practically help to control the center in your games. One of the reasons that the center is important is that the chess piece that controls more central squares is located much better, and as a result it has more possibilities. Also, the number of the squares that your piece controls is vital for determining how much influence they have on the game. As I said, I prepared 5 tips for you. Tip number 1. Occupy the center with your pawns. Please look at the board. e4, e6, d4. If he allows us, then we should occupy the center with 2 pawns. Let's say d5, French defense, e5. So now we control 2 central squares. Black controls the d5 square, he occupies it with his pawn, and also attack the e4 square, but in this position he can't really use it. c5, c3, knight e6, knight e3, queen b6, bishop e2. Okay, knight f5, knight c2, and in this position you're going to play g4 to chase the knight, so bishop b4 check, king f1, and on the next move we are about to play g4, king g2, so we chase the knight from the center, get our king to g2. Let's say h5, h4, bishop e7. Now we can start the attack on the other side, b4, because if knight takes b4, then after rook b1 he experiences real problems. The knight is pinned, we are about to play a3, so if, not a5, but if queen a5 in this position, just bishop d2, and he loses a piece. If, for example, he doesn't take on b4, let's say he plays this move, then just a3, and we play positionally. We dominate on the queen side, we are also get the control on the king side, and at the same time we totally control the center. Here he has no counterplay, while his bishops and rooks are located on a really bad position, especially the bishop on c8. And with 2 knights and queen, black can't really do anything. So here you occupy the center, you control the center, you are able to defend these central pawns. That's why your position is better and you have more options. Tip number 2. Fight for space in the center. If you get a space advantage, it automatically means that your piece gets more room to maneuver. More room means more possibilities and creativity to your future attack. For example, here e4, let's say black plays elegant defense, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, so we get the space, we advance the e-pawn, d6, knight f3, knight c6, and for example in this position, to get even more space and let the opponent feel a lack of space, we may play this move. What's the idea? If bishop takes, then c4, knight moves, and d5 fork. That's why here he has to play with the pawn. He takes with the pawn on e6, then c4, knight b6, knight c3. Yes, we are down a pawn, but at the same time e6 pawn blocks the enemy pieces from development, and they have almost no space. For example, how to deal with this bishop? Of course, the most logical continuation is to fiancetta it, g6. But if g6, then h4 with a strong attack. Bishop g7, bishop e3 first to protect this pawn, because black may play e5. This is what actually happened in one of my games against international master. So bishop e3 to fix everything, castle, and then h5 with a strong attack on the king side. So even without a pawn, white dominates in this position because white gets more space, and white forced black to get his pawn from f7 to e6. That restricts enemy pieces. Tip number 3, move your pieces to control more central squares. If you control more central squares than your opponent, you restrict his piece's activity. In such a case, he should find something if he wants to improve his pieces. But sometimes it's just impossible. There is nothing to do. And of course, you know, if a player doesn't have a clear plan, he starts to make mistakes. I'll show you, for example, how it happens in Mark the Bind against Dragon. d4, knight takes d4, g6, c4, it's accelerated Dragon, bishop g7, bishop e3, knight f6, knight c3, castle, bishop e2, d6. So now it's transposed to the normal variation of Dragon. Castle, let's say bishop d7, queen d2, a6. Typical moves for this position: f3, rook c8, rook a c1, knight takes d4, bishop d4. So you see, there are more pieces in the center for white. White controls d5, we get a piece on d4, also attacks e5, and keep in mind the idea to play e5 with the pawn, the other pawn. So at least 3 squares in this position are under white's control. Bishop c6, rook fd1, knight d7, a typical idea to trade the bishops, then even b4. So if we can't find a good attack in the center, then why not to play on the queen side? Maybe we'll try to trap this bishop. If, for example, knight e5, which looks natural but actually is a huge mistake, then f4, he has to retreat back, and after b5 the bishop is trapped, white is winning. Of course, it's not obligatory to play knight e5, this is a mistake, but what to do? To trade the bishops? Maybe, but anyway, white dominates because white controls the center. Tip number 4, neutralize or chase enemy pieces that control the center. How to neutralize enemy pieces? Just trade them, pin them, and of course you can just chase them with your pawns, but remember that it shouldn't weaken your position. I'm going to show you an example that happened in my daughter's game, and actually I was about to meet a similar position, but my opponent calculated this line properly and didn't go through this line. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop e3, so it's neither variation, e5, knight b3, bishop to e6, f3, bishop e7, queen d2, knight bd7, g4, and sometimes black plays b5 too early, and if so, we may react a4. If he takes, we just capture with the rook. However, people who don't understand the position, they can just play b4. After b4, knight goes to d5, bishop takes d5, he takes d5, and for example, in my daughter's game, it was knight b6. But we can actually chase the knight with a5. What can he do? If he goes back, it's fine. Our position is perfect. We get more space, we control the center. If he takes on d5, then g5, we chase another knight, and if knight moves, then the other one on d5 is hanging. That's why knight f3, g takes f6, then for example knight f1, g takes e7, knight d2, but e takes d8 equals queen check, rook takes d8, king d2, and white is winning because of extra knight for 2 pawns. For example, in my daughter's game, it was knight takes on c2 in this position, queen takes c2, bishop f6, queen c6 check, king goes to f8, and here my daughter took the pawn on a6, and this position is also winning for white. So 1 piece for 2 pawns. What did we do in this example? We just chased enemy pieces that control the center. So this knight and the other knight, we chased them with our pawns. We could also analyze the variation where we neutralize it by trading the bishop for a knight, but in this position a5 was just a better option. And finally, tip number 5, exchange a flank pawn for a central pawn. We already know that pawns play a very important role in the control over the center, and the central pawns play an even more important role than flank pawns. Therefore, it is often a good idea if you can exchange a flank pawn for a central pawn. It would mean that you have an extra central pawn, which is to your advantage. For example, it can happen when you play c3 and then d4. Knight f3, knight c6, so bishop b5, this is Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, the e4 pawn is not hanging, bishop a7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, d6, c3, castle, and h3 first, and after bishop b7 just d4. So we offer a trade in the center, and if he takes, we get the c pawn closer to the center, what means that we traded our c pawn for the central e pawn, which is of course in our favor. Here we have two pawns in the center and we control it. You see, this e5 square is attacked d5, and also we have two pawns in the center. Black has to find kind of a counterplay. Let's say knight a5, bishop c2 and c5, but even this move doesn't help black to overtake the control over the center. Then just d5, and we can do anything we want. For example, here I suggest to relocate our knight from b1 to g3, where it's much better. Then we may also think about our dark squared bishop. So white is slightly better. It doesn't mean that white is definitely winning, but it's easy to play this position for white, and any move that leads to a simplify of this position is in white's favor. And now I'm going to illustrate why the control over the center is important. For example, I'm going to show the game between my students and another player they played on the internet, but that's a really interesting game played in Evans Gambit. I taught him to play Evans Gambit, and now he applies this opening successfully. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and here b4, the idea of Evans Gambit. Bishop takes b4, c3, so we sacrifice the pawn to gain a few tempers and get the control over the center by pushing the pawn from d2 to d4. E takes d4, c takes d4, check. On b4, bishop d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, then d6. At least he controls the e5 square now. White castles, knight f6, knight c3, black castles, rook a b1 to attack on b7 in case of bishop moves, rook b8, h3, because now bishop g4 can be played, h6, rook a1, rook e8. And then here a typical plan is to play queen f4, e5, and rook d1. So queen f4, f7 is potentially hanging in case if this knight moves. That's why here black decided to play rook f8, what is actually not the best move. Rook goes to the center, bishop d7, looks like another waste of a temper. And then here all pieces are allocated to be able to dominate the center, and two pawns are here. What should we do? We also get two rooks on open files. Actually on the semi-open files, but we are about to open them. e5. Black played d takes e5, white replied with d takes e5. Now there is a pin that we can potentially exploit. Knight goes to h7. And how would you play here? If you want, you may pause this video and find the solution. However, my student found the best move. He played e6. So the bishop is pinned, the pawn has to take, otherwise black loses the bishop on d7. He takes, but now our queen is hanging. What to do? Take on e6 with a rook. Why? Because none of our pieces are hanging now. If he takes our queen, then rook e8 is a checkmate. If he takes the bishop, then bishop takes e6 is a move with a check. King moves to the corner, and then we take the queen. The f rook is pinned, that's why the queen is not handy. So he takes queen c7, and here with the queen and bishop against two rooks, white is winning. In the game it was just king h8, then knight h4, threatening to play knight g6, and then the king has to go to g8. After that he gets a checkmate. So rook f6 to stop this move, rook takes f6, knight takes f6, and knight e4 to get rid of this knight and play knight g6 and queen e4 with a strong attack. For example, he takes, we take with the queen, then knight comes to g6, it's almost a checkmate. That's why here black just played g5, but actually here my student decided to simplify the position. He just took on f6, queen f6, knight f6, g takes h4, rook takes d7, threatening with a checkmate. The game ended, black resigned, there is no defense against this checkmate. Anyway, if there is a defense, then at least white is one piece up and has absolutely winning position. So the control over the center and the centralization of our pieces allowed us to play e5. And that's why white won that game. Okay guys, try to implement these ideas into your games, and please share your results after that into the comment section below this video. The control over the middle of the board is important, and it's always better to start controlling the center from the very beginning of the game. This is how you can dominate and force your opponent to defend his position starting from the first moves. To be able to do this, I highly recommend to build an aggressive opening repertoire. If you want to learn top aggressive openings that I apply in my games, watch the video on the screen next, and I will see you there in a moment.